Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Strategic Priorities, Communications, and Intergovernmental Cooperation Committee meeting for Thursday, May 23rd. Call to order. Thank you for those in attendance and those who are viewing online here just first. Approval of the agenda, moved by Councillor McKinnon, seconded by Deputy Mayor Yankoff. And approval of the minutes for May 2nd, 2024, moved by Councillor McKinnon, seconded by Deputy Mayor Yankoff. And any business arising from those minutes?
Mr. Chair, one question. On notice of motion that I brought up, just wondering if there's any decision been made. Are we adding on to a current bylaw, or are we going to be making a new bylaw, 6A, in the minutes?
My understanding, good question, Councillor McKinnon. I think we can add on to the existing bylaw. I think that might be the easiest one to do, the most simplest to make a change to that bylaw and incorporate the illicit drugs or illegal drugs, however the wording is. That kind of came about from following our last meeting, and of course I missed the last council meeting, so I don't know. Eleanor, did you have anything to add to that, or did anybody have anything? That was kind of, I think, the direction that we were going in, and maybe Eleanor, if you had something to add to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually wasn't at that meeting, so Dan was.
Right.
So maybe when he gets back, I know he's coming, maybe he can add.
Sure.
When he's here. Thank you.
Good with that, Councillor McKinnon?
Yep. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, what bylaw? Is it Parklands bylaw that we're adding to?
It was the smoking and smoking in public places bylaw, I think, is where we were looking at making the changes and changing some of the wording to incorporate some of what Councillor McKinnon was looking to incorporate in the bylaw. And it was specifically addressed to public places, public parks. So the thinking is that we could probably take and expand our smoking bylaw and just incorporate those elements into it, and maybe it might require a changing of the naming of the bylaw or the content of the bylaw, and we have to go through those steps. So I think that's what we were looking
Bylaw
at.
for prohibiting possession and use of illegal drugs, alcohol. Alcohol is already under the provincial statute of, I think it's $350 fine if you're drinking if you have open liquor in a parkland or a public space. Illegal drugs and drug paraphernalia. I think if we go back to the September 5th meeting at Birchwood Junior High, if you recall what the chief said regarding the prosecution office, is that they're not dealing with small amounts or nothing that's major. They're not taking that to the prosecution up the, what is it? I'm trying to think of the word. Taking it up the food chain of prosecution, especially in the federal prosecution, because remember, that's a Criminal Code of Canada issue when it comes to illegal drugs. So I don't know, I'm trying to find out, how do we enforce it if our police services told us at a public meeting, September 5th last year, that it's going to be hard to do this?
Well, Your Worship, respectfully, what was mentioned there is a federal law in place where you're allowed to carry a minimum amount in your possession to get to a drug overdose prevention site. But right now, currently, you're not allowed to walk down the street. You can't go down Kent Street with an open bottle of beer or can of beer and drink it while you're walking on the street. So therefore, why would you be allowed to sit in the park and shoot up illegal drugs? So that's what I'm looking to stop. I've seen it firsthand. Schools are picking up needles before classes start in the mornings. We need to clean that stuff up in the city of Charlottetown. So make a bylaw that if it's blatant and it's out there, somebody calls the police, they have something to act on. We do not have a bylaw in place right now that the police can go and do that.
But again, I'm just trying to understand if our chief of police and police services made it very clear at a public meeting, September 5th, 2023 at Birchwood High School, is that federal prosecution directives are very clear. If it's not a major crime, then if our police officers go into a park, take some, there's drugs being used, take the drug paraphernalia, take the illicit or illegal drugs. And again, remember, Councillor McKinnon, these are not always illegal drugs. These are pharmaceutical drugs also that are being used. So I'm just asking and this should be vetted through police. How do we enforce? We can take whatever they have, we can take that off them, but how do we enforce it? How do we provide, put deterrence in there that they don't do it again? And that's the key.
I think that was the goal of trying to figure out how to. Is there a path forward for that? Can we achieve that through rewording of our bylaw or creation of a new bylaw? Originally, the request from Councillor McKinnon was to have a separate bylaw. But could the contents of what he's looking for be incorporated into an existing bylaw and simply amend that bylaw without creating a new one? And I think that's kind of the discussion, if I remember correctly, and Dan's here now, from that last meeting, is that we were kind of looking to how do we align what's in our bylaw with Criminal Code of Canada, whatever else has to happen. So I think there's questions that have to be answered, but the goal is to try and find a way to reduce or hopefully eliminate illegal drug use in our public spaces, in our parks, around our schools, and that sort of thing. And so that's the target. How do we hit that target is kind of what the question is. And Dan, if you had anything else to add from that, I think that's kind of where we left it at the last meeting, was we may be looking to align with the current bylaw, or we may have to create a new bylaw. Maybe, I don't know if you had any further update. I asked Eleanor, but she wasn't at that last meeting, so.
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
If you have anything else to add.
Not a lot to add, but I guess, we can create a bylaw that says you can't consume illegal drugs in a public space. The challenge, though, is on the enforcement and prosecution side, which is, something that Chief McConnell would be better better capable of speaking to. So, you kind of have to consider cradle to grave in terms of what you're trying to prevent, and then how, what you do to follow through to make sure it doesn't happen. But yeah, so not a whole lot more to add than that.
Councillor McKinnon, do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Yeah, like the ball is starting to roll here. We're getting publicity. British Columbia has also brought back the criminalization of the drugs. All drugs are illegal if you take them outside your household. Even marijuana that is legal now, it's only legal in certain aspects. So all drugs, whether in a public place, they're deemed to be illegal. So we need to, for the safety of our residents, safety of our school kids, I think this is a bylaw we need to get in place. Criminal code is 4 inches thick. They're not all used. I think we should get the bylaw in place and talk to the police, have everybody in discussion, but at least get the bylaw in place, and then we can deal with enforcement if, get things in place afterwards after that.
Chair,
Go ahead, Dan.
There was one other kind of current event news piece that I did pick up, and that was where Toronto had requested of the feds to decriminalize simple possession of illegal drugs, which they denied. So there seems to be a little bit more of a move towards recognizing that the federal policy may be swinging a little too too permissive, if you will, in terms of public use of illicit drugs. So anyway, that's just one other little piece that was in the news last week.
So in terms of taking this to the next step, does it fall in under where does it fall? Who kind of takes the ball with this to decide where it eventually ends up? Is it going to be an amendment to our public smoking bylaw? Is it going to be a separate bylaw? Where does that end? I know we have 26 bylaws that are sitting out there that are in need of being updated, and I know that's a concern that we've always expressed. So I think, again, like with a lot of things, I just want it to land somewhere so it gets owned by some department or some person or whatever it might be. Eleanor, did you have something to add there?
Yeah, actually, two questions. One, I should know the answer to it, but I don't on the spot. So this notice of motion, the motion went through council, and council approved that motion in one shot, saying that we are doing this bylaw. Has that happened yet? Because that's a step that we need to take in order to move forward. I thought what had happened was they said they would send it to committee to review it in more detail before agreeing to it, and it had to
Right.
come back to committee. So there's a step we need to take to get it through to council, saying all of council agrees we're doing this bylaw. So just putting that out there.
I think the original notice of motion was to take the steps to create it. And then when it came to here, we kind of were unsure, does it require a separate bylaw or can it be incorporated? And I think that's where we ended up.
Okay,
At
I
the
understand.
last
So that's where
meeting.
the conversation went. I
Right.
think in theory is, like, do you want to regulate this or not, would be the question, right? So we could take that back to council. Yes, we want to regulate this, the drug use in park spaces, and this is how we're going to do it. We're going to do it through a bylaw. We don't have to be specific which bylaw. And I wouldn't at this point, simply because of 26 bylaws. It makes sense to actually combine some of these bylaws. Like, you don't need perhaps an individual smoking bylaw, individual drinking bylaw, individual drug bylaw. They could all be under one. And we were just looking at a bylaw this morning, which is called a community standards bylaw, which has smoking in there, bullying, drinking, lawns, whatever you can imagine. It's under community standards instead. So there's ways to do this and make it more efficient. So if we have other bylaws that need updating and we can all update this into one succinct bylaw, I think that makes sense. It's just we wouldn't have a name for it yet.
Okay, so can we, to satisfy Councillor McKinnon's request, can we add that to be located somewhere with the intent of what he's seeking to achieve? Can that be incorporated somewhere? If it's a community standards bylaw, the smoking, wherever it might be, can we try and find a home for it where it can be incorporated?
Yes, so yes, definitely. There's two pieces that have to be answered here. One, does council want to fully do this? We haven't had that proper vote yet. But two, can we actually do this? So actually, Councillor McKinnon had seen that BC had asked the federal government for a reversal on how they were approaching drug use, and they actually granted it in BC. But the province had to do that. It wasn't done at the city to get that reversal in terms of how they try cases related to drug use. So if we find ourselves in this situation, and I'm not sure what the chief of police said, if we create a bylaw for it, which is a fine system, well, if you take someone who's a drug user, potentially doesn't have a lot of money, bylaw officer goes in and says, you can't do this, here's your fine. And the fine never gets paid, city doesn't collect it, and there's nothing more. So if we know that's the only tool and we can't take any other steps in terms of arrest or taking it further into the courts, is that worth expending the municipality's resources on? So that'll be something that committee and council have to consider in doing that. But that's what we need more information and background exactly on what the province of BC did, what the cities are doing, and then we can also come up with a suggestion of how we can bring some bylaws together, package that all up, then that goes through, first here, then through to council.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, then we would have to say, yeah, go and do that work. That would be our committee recommendation. It would go to council. Council would have to say, yeah, go ahead and do that work.
Yeah.
And then the work would begin. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Am I hearing you right? Okay. So maybe to get that ball rolling, can we have a discussion here and say, is that something that we would like to pursue? Or would there be I don't know if we do a motion or just a general consensus here that that's something that we would like
I'll put a
to.
motion on if that's what you need.
Deputy wants to say something, I think, first.
Oh, there it is. I think the purpose of this leaving council and coming back here was for us to have that discussion and get the information so that when we go back to council, we have all the information to say, this committee recommends creating or adding on to this bylaw, and here's some of the reasons why, because we've got the work done. So I think staff needs to do the work first before we take it back to council, so that we know then we were giving all the information to council, so council can make a succinct decision and say, yes, let's proceed with bringing all these items into one bylaw. I mean, not to hold up this any longer, because I think it's very valid. But I think that the work needs to be done from this committee before it goes to council. And I don't think we've completed the work yet, because as CIO Mohammed has just mentioned, there is work to be done on the back end and from a management perspective. That's as much as.
But if we recommend, if I'm hearing Eleanor correctly, we're asking professional staff to tie up their time in the creation of. So I don't think we can make that decision at the committee level. I think the council would have to say, yeah, that's a worthwhile investment of time and effort, if I'm understanding
No.
things correctly.
I think that's always, just to follow up, I think that's always the committee work. I mean, we're always taking our chance that we're exhausting staff resources, and at the end of the day, council, it can die on the council floor, but I think the work still has to be done, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the work still has to be done from a committee level before it
Yeah.
goes to council.
So, Mr. Chair, the standing committee has a responsibility to put together information. And, BC's request that went to the Fed, went to Health Canada. See, Health Canada is overseeing this. So they regulate drugs and anything that pertains to the protection of Canadians. And Health Canada was also responsible for providing, the province had to go through Health Canada to get that safe injection site open. And one part of that process was to have a public meeting. Now, how was that public meeting was to take place? Well, we recalled what happened on July 18th down at the Memorial Hall. So my point is, the spirit of it, Councillor McKinnon, I agree with the spirit, but I know you were at that meeting on September 5th at Birchwood Junior High School. He said, enforcing is going to be difficult. So what do we want to do as a municipality to ensure that our parks, open spaces are safe for children, for families to go play and enjoy themselves? But, you got a criminal code, you have Health Canada, you have the provincial responsibility. Health, okay, just remember, health is not our mandate, okay? Health is a constitutional responsibility of the province of Prince Edward Island. So is education. It's in the Constitution for all provinces. So our role is police, fire, the core services. So again, we need more information to find out, do we want to make a recommendation to council to add or create a new bylaw pertaining to the notice of motion? Thank you.
Go ahead, Eleanor.
Thank you, Chair. So I think where I hear the conversation going is we need to take this away and schedule it for another of these committee meetings with more information to bring back and have it framed up for council a little better in terms of resolution. The challenge is, and the reason why it's taking so long, is because we don't have specific staff right now who are working on policy and bylaws. We have some, like we have Dan, who's trying to go with procurement. So we're going to have a conversation at council in terms of prioritizing what is the most important bylaw for us to work on right now. Yesterday it was unsightly. Today is it this one? Like, we have to be able to say we've got limited amount of resources. We can churn one out, but we can't do all five at the same time. So that'll be part of that discussion as well. But I'm happy for us to take this away, come back with a little bit more information, like what happened in BC, capture some of the things with police and maybe some of the outstanding things, and then frame it up for council.
I think that's a good starting point, and it'll allow us to move forward. At least let's move the needle somewhat on here and see where we're going to go. Councillor McKinnon, does that work for you?
Yeah, I think we could talk on this for a couple hours.
Exactly.
If we keep going, so no, I'll just leave it at that. Moving
Yep.
forward with CAO Mohammed.
Okay,
And Chair, just as a
Sure.
sidebar, if I'm hearing CIO Mohammed correctly, if we're weak in the policy department of the city, that's probably something not for this department, but maybe that's another notice of motion where council needs to approve some extra dollars, either from a contractual basis or something for them to get the assistance they need to create some of these bylaws. But I know that's probably not under this committee, that's just a sidebar.
Okay.
So take that under advisement, I guess.
all right. Thank you for that. Any other business arising from the minutes? Nope. Okay. So first discussion item, number 6, the letter to the government of Prince Edward Island, re 15 Park Street. And I'll call on Michael Roos. Mike, you're going to take this? Yep. Okay. Our
Thank you,
Director
Mr.
of
Chair.
Integrated Growth.
So on page 5 of your agenda, there's a report outlining the issue. To keep it brief, I'll just mention that the purpose of this is to seek clarity from the province on the long-term vision for the facility at Park Street. And so we've drafted a letter to that point, requesting clarity on what those future plans are, given the upcoming deadlines for the temporary variances that were issued previously. Happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair, can I just add something?
Go ahead, Your Worship.
I want to thank Michael for putting together the correspondence going to the Minister Rob Lance, and you, Mr. Chair, and myself, CAO, Michael Roos, the deputy, was at one of the meetings with the province on this issue down at the Shaw Building to find that path forward. And I think every meeting, both meetings that we had, what is the long-term plan? You have to start working on changes if you want to make changes, or you have to tell us sooner than later what your plan is to do. Leave it down there, but if you leave it in Beach Street, then it requires an amendment to the bylaw. And if they decide to move it, then tell us where they want to move it. But I think this is just to reinforce what's the long-term plan. Thank you.
Nope. Councillor McKinnon?
And just to echo Your Worship, thank you to Director Roos for this letter. It was, I like how it was written, and might get the ball rolling on their end, let them keep them on notice that we're watching, and no, it's a good letter. That's all. Thanks.
I had a question, Mike. So again, I appreciate the reminders on this because the clock has been ticking. One of the options that would be available is a submission of a comprehensive development agreement, if they so chose to remain on a permanent basis. I understand that that could be an option, correct? To submit some kind of proposal or whatever to remain on a more permanent location. Currently, they have temporary shelter, temporary outreach center with those timelines attached. And an option could potentially, I'm just throwing out as possibilities, to permanently have it there, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a good question. That is correct. If they choose that this is their long-term site, again, part of the rationale for sending this letter at this time is a reminder on those upcoming deadlines and be respectful of the planning process that we need to go through from a regulatory standpoint to get those approvals through in a transparent format.
So that is my question. And I was kind of leading to, is I wanted to ascertain that first. But what is the timeline around that? Like, let's say they chose to go do that. They've got June, July, August, September, October, November, December.
December 8th is the deadline.
Yeah,
for
so they've got basically
emergency
7 months. Say they choose to go down that route. How, this doesn't happen overnight. There are steps to follow, there's timelines involved. Is that, if that's an option that they so choose, would that be feasible to be accomplished within the 7-month timeframe? Or
Certainly
how
would
long
be-
would that require in order to get that done?
Yeah, I would say typically it would take, a couple months, depending on the complexity. I think the first step in this case is getting clear direction from the province on if this is the site that they're choosing to move forward on, or if they're still considering other locations.
Okay. That's great.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Your Worship.
so with two professional planners in the room, CAO and Director Michael, comprehensive development area agreement, if that is a proposal that we send to them, that requires a public consultation, does it not?
That's correct.
So, Mr. Chair, I think that's the issue here.
Well, that's that's why I asked the question, because this is not it's not a simple zoning process. This is
Yeah,
it takes time, and they have 7 months,
yeah.
basically, to address the first of the two outstanding temporary
Yeah.
permitted uses that they have. So, again, we don't know what the plan is, which is the purpose of the letter, which is great. But again, if there is something, I think in fairness to our planning people and to us as a council, I think if that's something that is potentially coming down, then balls have to get rolling in order to make that happen. So,
No, the reason I bring that up, Mr. Chair, because the track record for the province on these public consultations, first on 33 Belmont Street, to establish a safe injection site, and what took place there, Councillor, the deputy and I attended both meetings that were held at the Murchison Centre, and then we saw the issue of, again, taking another swipe at it down at the Memorial Hall on July 18th, and how that turned out. So I think that, look, if they want to go down that road, be prepared that it'll be a very feisty and open, and it could be a meeting that could cause some issues, hopefully not a repeat of Memorial Hall. But my point is, Mr. Chair, they were telling us at both meetings they're looking at another site. They need, this may not be the ideal site. So letter should confirm, and we don't get a response in a week, 14 days, we'll send another letter. Just stay on top of it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
okay. Good, Deputy?
Does this letter have to go to council? No?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's what I thought the report said. Thank you.
All right, so the next item is to move into a closed session as per the Municipal Government Act of PEI, Sections 119(1)A, B, and G. A, commercial information which if disclosed would likely be prejudicial to the municipality or parties involved, land negotiations. B, information in which received in confidence which if disclosed would likely be prejudicial to the municipality or parties involved. And G, the conduct of an investigation under or enforcement of an act or bylaw, code of conduct, bylaw matter. So motion to move into a closed session. Moved by Councillor McKinnon, seconded by the deputy. All those
Cup of coffee?
All right, we are back in the open session, and just to conclude the closed session, the two items that were discussed will be addressed at a future council meeting and are ongoing. New business,
0.
0. Motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Deputy,
Second.
by his worship.
Thank you.
Thank you
Chair,
for coming.
back. Thank you
and
very